5, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
All right, welcome in. It's the Three Guys Talking Ball podcast. It is episode 72, and I didn't have a name that we can name the podcast after, but since it is Masters Week, we'll just name it after what the par of Augusta National is, which is 72. So I guess that worked out that it is fitting that it's episode 72. It's Masters Week.
There we go.
UConn is the new state of Texas, as that's their fourth straight time they've had the Final Four in Texas, or 3 of the 4 times it's been in Texas that UConn has won it all.
No, before.
And we had what's that?
Before.
Or 4, yeah. 4 of the last 5 then. 4 of the last 5.
Houston twice.
Yep. Yeah, so 4 of the last 5. Got to see one good game of the Final Four. The rest were kind of pear-shaped. The UConn Miami game, that was not much. Sanogo hit 2 threes to start the game with one of the ugliest shots I have ever seen, and I think I wrote down that there's not going to be a whole lot to talk about, and there wasn't. Great run by Miami, but UConn, like they've been all tournament, was just too much. So, and then got the first game of the day was a barn burner, one of the best Final Four games that I can remember. That wasn't a championship game. It was a game where FAU felt like they dominated most of it, and then the first half they had a really good first half, and then they got up, came out guns blazing in the second half, storming. They got up by 14, and I also wrote down that it felt like San Diego State was falling apart. Parrish had a dead ball technical, and then the next possession they had a foul on a 3-point shot and got down by 14, and San Diego State just didn't panic. They just kind of stayed the course, hung around. And next thing you know, Lamont Butler's hitting a game-winning shot. But what an incredible game, guys. Did you what are your thoughts on this game?
I watched while I ran. So I honestly turned it on like the last 2 minutes. I wanted Florida Atlantic to win after I saw they were winning pretty much the whole game. We were like cleaning up around the house, but I wanted them to win. It looked like they were going to, and then Butler did Butler. I don't know. He's a stud. Like, he's coming back too, isn't he?
I think so. I don't know. I guess I haven't really dug too deep into it. Could be.
Thought he was. But yeah, he's a good player.
I don't know, guys. I think when you just look at it, you think FAU's lack of size around the hoop finally caught up to them, especially in that the last 13 minutes of this game. San Diego State had 9 offensive rebounds, I want to say, and like that.
They finished with 12.
12, but I think they had
probably 9, somewhere in there. Yeah.
In that last 12 minutes, and they were just kind of overpowered FAU. It was too much. FAU, they had the big 7-footer from Russia, and then athletes across him. I guess they had that other big guy too, with the palm tree tattooed on his pec. But it was San Diego State was just too much, and those offensive rebounds and how they were able to dominate and own the glass in that game is what kept them in. If FAU had a little more size and they were able to rebound a little better on the defensive end, they'd probably win that game by 10 points. And
well, just think of how many times where San Diego State, they went 13 of 22. There was a span where they missed like 9 of 12 free throws.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would get bailed out by getting an offensive board and getting a possession out of it. And FAU, for the first 30 minutes of the game, they did a really good job of really kind of exploiting the San Diego State defense, where they were very patient on offense. They had good ball movement. They took good shots. And then the last 10 minutes, it just felt like they were forcing shots. They settled for a lot of bad shots. They kind of they dribble and then let the shot clock run out and then try to cast something up. And that's just not a good way to win in March, or especially in the Final Four. I mean, you could get away with it with a 1 versus 16 occasionally, but it was just kind of like just very uncharacteristic of FAU the last 10 minutes of the game, and SDSU capitalized. And the other part too with the Lamont Butler shot is they were without their two best offensive players on the court. And then Butcher didn't want to said he didn't take a timeout, which is incredible. I ran out of plays, so I figured I'd just let him go.
I don't know. I've always been a fan of not taking a timeout and letting your team go and trying to make something happen that way. It doesn't give a chance for your opposition to set up a defense and try to stop someone, maybe get a 7-footer on the inbound guy. But I'm just curious, what have your guys' thoughts always been? Because like I said, I've always been, hey, go out, let him play, kind of what Roy Williams does, and see what happens. But I'm just curious, what do you guys think on that?
I think it depends on the situation. I think like with off a missed free throw with 10 seconds left, where everything is just kind of helter-skelter, you almost have to go let him play, because on one side you allow the defense to get set up and kind of discuss, go over as far as what are you doing on screens, what are you doing situationally, where if there's no timeout, they're just going out running and playing and seeing. But, there's a lot of times too where, like, I think when you're up in that 20, anywhere from that 15 to like 30 range, I think it's almost better, because there's almost too much standing around, and then action happens so much later where you don't get a good shot off.
Mm-hmm. And then you kind of get like what Kansas State had this year, and Michigan State against Kansas State.
I really just think it also depends on who's on your team and do you trust them to actually make the play. Like Noel, he probably said, screw it, I trust him. And like you said, Kansas State didn't make the right play. So, I mean, it's probably a case-by-case basis. But if I have like a 4th or 5th year senior point guard, yeah, I'm probably not going to call the timeout.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say, because, San Diego State, they trusted Butler knowing that he's a veteran guy. He's been around a while. And they knew he's going to make a play. But, God, it was so close, guys, and so crazy to see how close he was to stepping out of bounds there. I mean, he was centimeters away from ending this San Diego State season by stepping out of bounds.
93 feet, 11 inches. He used every inch of that court.
He needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and he had a cool story too of he had a family member that was murdered. He's got a brother that's in the Paralympics that's doing really well. So it was cool. It's cool. That's what March is about, is seeing those cool stories and seeing those guys succeed and battle through that adversity. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose we can just go right on to the championship game, which there isn't a whole lot to talk about. UConn, like they did the rest of the tournament, pretty much controlled the game. There was a little bit of a stretch right away where UConn was, it took a little bit of time for them to settle in. They had those three turnovers early, but once they kind of got where their feet were and just realized that it's just a basketball game, that was really when they started to settle in. They started hitting more shots. Felt like most of their shots were within a 5-foot range from the hoop, and it's a high percentage shot. And San Diego State just kind of settled for threes, and they ended up going 9 minutes without a field goal. And another story is UConn did a really good job of limiting the Aztecs to one shot. It felt like, especially in the first half, and credit San Diego State defense too, where it felt the defense played well and they kept them in. It was only like an 11-point game at halftime. And I wrote down that if they can keep it around that 10-point range, they're going to have a shot to win. And they ended up getting it to within 6. In the end, their offense just was not good enough. And they capitalized on a few UConn turnovers, which they had earlier in the game. And then at the under 4 timeout, I thought Dan Hurley had a good message. He said, guys, if we don't turn the ball over and take care of it, and take good shots, we're gonna be national championships. And that's exactly what happened. They dominated the final 4 minutes and ended up stretching the lead from 6 to it being a 17-point game. And Dan Hurley has himself a national title.
Was this the most dominant run we've ever seen?
Ethan, I am very glad. We didn't discuss this at all, but I wrote down, I had this same thing down on the notes, but it definitely has to be up in the discussion for sure. I mean, they trailed in the tournament for a total of like 5 minutes. I saw
The majority of that was
they didn't have a game. Yeah, they were trailing in their first half of the first game, and then after that, it was just dominated.
The only other one I could maybe compare with off the top of my head that I know, I got a couple, would be Villanova in 2018. Where they just, rough-shotted through everybody and they couldn't miss. And I don't know how this team played throughout that whole tournament, but I wonder about that 2009 Carolina team. With
that's that one I had down too.
Those are the only other two I could think about where I'm like, okay, yeah, those teams were clearly the best teams in the tournament. It wasn't close.
So I kind of went back and I did some looking. 96 Kentucky has the largest margin of victory in the tournament, but we were 1 and 2 years old, so don't remember that one. The other ones that I have written down was like you, Grant. I had 2009 Carolina. That's probably the one that sticks out in my mind the most. 2012 Kentucky team. Also, their last 2 games were technically close, but Kentucky controlled those ball games from start to finish. The 16 and 18 Villanova team, more so that 18 Villanova team where they just refused to miss at all. And then a couple other ones that I don't really remember, but just going off of margin of victory. 04 UConn was also, they only had 1 game where they were, I believe, it was a 1 possession game where they beat Duke by 1 point in the Final Four. 02 Maryland, also a team, I think their games, they were all double figures except maybe 1. And then 01 Duke, similar, and same with 2000 Michigan State.
Okay.
As far as, yeah. Well, no, what are you talking about? Maryland's in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're definitely of our lifetime of what we remember. They're definitely in the Mount Rushmore of best tournament runs ever.
It's kind of crazy though. Like and again, you play who you can play, but it's almost like this UConn team almost got a pass just because they didn't have to play any great teams. But then that was just college basketball this year. Arkansas, when they played them, they could beat anyone in the country because they beat Kansas. They could also lose to anybody. And then unfortunately, when they played Gonzaga, Timmy got in foul trouble. Miami just wasn't big enough. Their size caught up to them and playing San Diego State in the title game. So it's not like, they had that gauntlet of a tournament run. But, hey, that's not their fault because you play who you play.
Yeah, play who you
and,
play.
They beat that ass whenever they played. So you can't take anything away from them. Just you want some people will say that. They'll be like, the caveat is they didn't play anybody.
That's the NCAA tournament though. It's so dependent on matchups, and you're at the end of the day, you're still dealing with college kids where, guy could have his girlfriend dump him like right before tip off, and he's not in the right headspace. I don't know if it's ever happened, but you can't tell me it hasn't. It's probably happened at some point.
Oh, I'm sure it has.
I mean, they beat the living shit out of everyone. Like if anyone's going to complain about who they played, then you obviously don't understand the NCAA tournament at all.
Or watched the way they played. It wouldn't have mattered if they would have played Alabama or Houston, because UConn is just as good defensively as Houston is, but UConn is deeper and they are better offensively. They were one of the better teams if they don't have that lull in January. And then Dan Hurley said, "Get us now." or because we're going to go on a run here. And well, they did.
Was that after the Villanova loss?
Yep.
It was around there,
Okay.
yeah.
And also, discussion has you I think UConn, you can say, has entered blue blood territory. They have to be considered a blue blood.
They've
now.
always been, because let's put it in perspective. This is their 5th title in 24 years. Coach K won 5 titles in over 40 years at Duke. So even take away yesterday's one, that's 4 championships in 23 years. You're a blue blood.
With 3 different coaches too.
Yeah, they've always been there. They just unfortunately fell in the trap of college sports realignment, where they got kicked out of the Big East, or with the formerly Big East, and they went to the American for a couple of years, and then now with the Big East, people kind of forgot about them. And then also, after Kevin Ollie won that title in 2014, they fell flat on their face and he got fired. So we had a 10-year stretch where we kind of forgot about UConn, but 5 titles in 24 years, you're a blue blood. I mean, how many titles does Kentucky have in the last 24 years? 2?
24. They won. I think they won it in 12 and then in 98. I want to say it was 98. What? It was Tubby's first year.
Well,
there.
didn't they win it the years before with Pitino, and essentially Tubby's was Pitino's player? So even if that's the case, let's say 3. 5 is more than 3.
Yeah. We could call it even and just say 3 in our lifetime.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because it was 96, 98, and 12.
There you go.
But like going back to, like, they joined the American because they had that brief run with Randy Edsall where they thought they were a football school, so that's why they moved to the American, and they got the shit kicked out of them. So then I'm pretty sure they're independent now in football. And now to join the Big East, where they get that, they have that recruiting. They're getting that recruiting base back too, where they're playing in the Garden all the time, and they're playing local teams that were, those historic Big East teams. Because there's also, I think, a time too when conference realignment was happening where there was discussion that they really wanted to join the ACC, and they just never got an invite because their football program was so bad. Yeah.
Interesting.
You can make a conference the Big East is the second best basketball conference in the country, and I think it's a very fair argument.
The Big East is back, baby. Now I might have to go watch the 30 for 30 on the old Big East.
I mean, you look at those old teams: Georgetown, Villanova, Providence. When we were younger, Pittsburgh, Louis,
St. John's.
That's college basketball right there.
Who I think they're going to be back. I'm not saying they're going to make the Final Four next year, but Rick Pitino.
Oh yeah.
Say what you want about him. He's a hell of a coach. And he's gonna work in the transfer portal. He's gonna get his guys in, and they're gonna be competing in the Big East next year. I fully expect them to be in the tournament next year.
With the transfer portal, that helped UConn this year because Newton.
Yep.
Their point guard. He was a former East Carolina guy. He got them in the transfer portal. So you look at the way these coaches are going, and I just checked today because I was curious. Next year's recruiting classes for college basketball, Kentucky's got like 5 5-star players. Well, that might not help you win because you need guys out of the transfer portal. You need adults. You need grown-ass men. Look what happened to Duke this all their freshmen.
Well, Hunter Dickinson, I guess, has a Zoom call with Kentucky tomorrow. So there's that. I think I saw Oscar. What's that?
They'll get a couple older guys to go with them.
Yeah. Well, I think Oscar Sheway is going to be back too, because it sounds like he's not going to be a very good pro, and Kentucky will throw the bag at him.
He's not even going to have a career in Europe playing basketball.
No, you can't take both of those guys. You'd have no spacing whatsoever. Like, you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, you couldn't do anything if you kept those guys.
No, I'm not a coach, and I know that.
Well, and Calipari's not a good X's and O's coach either. He's a businessman, and a snake. But X's and O's, he's ass.
Yeah.
So, well, but it's a big name. But so who knows? We'll see what happens. I also saw there's a possibility Hunter Dickinson might come back to Michigan
Because you
too.
enter the transfer portal doesn't mean you're going to leave.
Yeah, and it depends on the school too, because there's certain schools that say once you leave, it doesn't matter, you're not coming back.
Okay.
So what are you eating there, Ethan?
I got some Culver's ice cream.
Oh,
Great girlfriend Hannah
jealous.
grabbed me some, and now we got Mr.
Shout out
Boone.
Hannah.
Mr. Boone wants some really bad.
Hey Boone, hey buddy.
He's been
All
asleep
right.
the other day. We went on a walk, and he's finally awake now.
Yeah, well,